Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, my name's Rich McDonald, and I played David Mason in Call of Duty Black Ops 2, and you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
Hey everybody, you're listening to Everything Geek podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hey, it's Leif Gamfert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldovar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Rory Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Rory, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have actor David Brimmer, best known as the voice of Odion and Shada in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Zeman the Ape King in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Wulfric, Crusher Wake, Simon, Victor and Dr. Proctor in Pokémon, Zanramon, Big Boss and Dr. Malignus in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Zanramon in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Battle Nexus and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Mutant Nightmare, Professor Pester in Viva Piñata, Nosferatu Zodd in Berserk, Berserk the Golden Age Arc 1 The Egg of the King, and Berserk the Golden Age Arc 3 The Advent, Sir Crocodile in One Piece, Headmaster Saladin in Winx Club, Phil in Slayers Revolution and Almayce in Slayers Try. He also voiced Odion again in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links and Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monsters Coliseum. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, Rory. Good to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks. That's quite a list. I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that one, didn't I? Yeah.
So getting right into my questions for you, David, for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with your background, can you tell us how you got into acting?
Wow, I mean, how much time do you have? Back in second grade, I was the Wicked Witch in a play, and the teacher said you were fabulous. You know, so that's like, oh, okay. I really got into it at Exeter when I was in school, the Phillips Exeter Academy. Did a couple of shows there. The first was Porgy Firebiter in the Fire Sign Theater's Don't Crush That Dwarf, Hand Me the Pliers. So we did a live version of that. And then I was cast in the Caucasian Chalk Circle. So that's how I got the bug. Then ended up hitchhiking to New York from Pennsylvania one summer every day to attend a Circle of the Square theater school. And then ended up training with Stella Adler in the late 70s, early 80s. So that's pretty much how I got into it.
It's really interesting, and if you don't catch the acting bug starting off by playing a witch, then I'm not sure how else you're going to catch the bug.
Yeah, so that was it. And then, you know, when I was a teenager, I was always into the sea captains. I'm so much so I wear turtlenecks and, you know, double-breasted jackets and caps and all that, and would smoke a pipe. And I was thinking, wow, being a sea captain would be cool. And then I really did some historical research and went, no, actually, that pretty much sucks. Why did I think I wanted to be a sea captain? Oh, yeah, from watching it on TV and in the movies. I don't want to be a sea captain. I want to play one. You know, and that's kind of also where it sunk in. It's like it's more fun to play these characters than actually do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because even when you're like growing up, and I'm sure you can agree with this, like, you know, you grow up watching something on film or on TV, and you don't want to just watch it, you want to be that person.
Well, that was big when I was growing up. I was even older than you, my friend. When I was growing up, it was basically my early life up to year 18. You know, we were in the Vietnam War. We went in the year I was born in 57. The first advisors were sent in, and the war ended in 75. So the first 18 years of my life, we were in war in Vietnam. So you grow up watching a lot of the great war films that were made at the time. The Longest Day and The Dirty Dozen, and Kelly's Heroes. And so you watch those films, you're thinking, yeah, being a soldier would be great. But then every night you're watching the actual war on TV and seeing what it actually is. No, that's not so romantic anymore. So it was an interesting dichotomy there. And then when I was younger, I thought about going to the military. Actually, when I graduated from Exeter, I got called from my senator's office saying they could get me an appointment to West Point. But at that time, I decided I'd rather be an actor than a soldier. I was getting calls from all the recruiters at the time. My favorite, the best, was the Marine Corps. They called me, and I knew when they were calling because they'd ask for John, which is my first name. It's John David Brimmer. And so they go, is John there? And this Marine guy is like, well, there are many career opportunities, in the Marines, David. Well, John, what would you like to do? I said, well, I want to be an actor. And he paused for about 15 seconds. And then he came back and he's like, well, several Marines were recently used in the film The Wind and the Lion. And I'm like, oh, man, that's good. That's really good. No, thank you. But that's the best I've heard so far. Anyway, Rory, I'm rambling again.
Oh, it's completely fine. That's such an interesting story. And that, some of the Marines, were in that film. I didn't know about that, so it's really interesting to hear that.
It was a good sell. It's like, yeah, okay, so they're the Marines running in the background there. Okay, that's cool. But I thought that was a good comeback. He thought of something that fast on the fly. I'm like, okay, the Marines, they impressed me. And they still do today. I know several Marines and ex-Marines now, so in my other line of work.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. Can you tell us how you were originally cast as Odion in Yu-Gi-Oh?
Oh, my dear friend, I think that's lost to the sands of time. I mean, I was working, those were the heady days, working at 4Kids Productions, and you would get passed around to different directors for different shows. You get to in sync with the director there, and then they want to bring you on different projects. I first got working with doing the voiceover work through a former student who answered an ad in backstage from 4Kids and ended up cast as a lead in tons on the shows we're talking about, Pokémon, and so that happened. He's like, you got to get in here. You're going to work like that. So that was my first in. But then, people just heard my voice and thought he'd be good for this role. So that's how I think I got introduced to it. When someone said, oh, yeah, we want you to read for this. And it was just fun. I just loved the look of the character. He just looks so, pardon, I hope they can say this, badass. Is that okay?
No, it's completely okay. Odion sure did have a memorable design, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just loved the way he looked. So that was fun. And then finding, then you really just start to suss out the character. You look at him, and just first you look at him. And then you listen, you of course read the dialogue, how is he behaving with the other characters, what does he do here? But that look, it's just fun to try to figure out what would he sound like, what would this guy sound like. And part of that was done because they liked to timber the quality of my voice. So that was part of it, but then working with the director to, really sculpt the character is a ton of fun.
Absolutely, and it's not easy to come up with a voice for a character with a tattoo on one side of his face.
Well, it's interesting how you play with the qualities. I mean, I remember seeing a cartoon one time of this bald, short guy inside the recording booth. And outside the director is giving him a note, and it says, yeah, let's try that again. Can you do that a little taller and with more hair? And it is like that. There's something that you pick up that happens with voice actors, because you can be a little more subtle with it with just the voice, is you pick up on, that's what I'm saying with the quality of the tattoos on half the side of the face. Well, what does that evoke for you? These are just Egyptian hieroglyphs that are tattooed on. This is an Egyptian priest. And what does that entail? And what does that bring up for you? What qualities does that bring forth? You know, sense of mystery, certainly. Sense of timelessness, sense of power. The Book of the Dead. All of these things come up. So yeah, it is a fun process. I guess that's one of the joys of being an actor, you know.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. What do you remember of what the crew told you about the character of Odion when you were cast in the role?
Again, it's been so long ago, but I do remember that as, the loyal servant. This is, it's like the god he works for, who he serves. Yes, he's a loyal servant, and a powerful one at that. He's mastered these arcane arts, but that's it. That's his role. And again, with the specific, we're looking at the mythos of ancient Egypt, so it's all colored through that lens, of who he is, how those basic qualities. We're talking about loyalty and strength and courage and those sort of things that are great, but they're abstract. But then to get more specific, it's filtered through this, so that would make it these qualities to what those are. So yeah, that's, again, as I said, that's the fun part of doing it, and that's usually with you and the director, and sometimes the engineer, who's worked on it a bit too and has a sense of it. Because I've worked with some fantastic engineers over the years as well. Some of them have even standing in for directors because they've done it so long.
Yeah, definitely. And can you tell us about the process of bringing Odion to life? Were you given a lot of freedom when it came to voicing him, or were the crew particular about how they wanted him to be portrayed?
I have to say, working with the directors there at Four Kids, but just often, sometimes there are specific things that they're looking for exactly because they're trying to really be as true as they can to the original. And so sometimes that's going on. But other times you have a little more freedom. So, and again, it's like doing Shakespeare in a way. Yes, you are speaking an iambic pentameter. So that is the form. But within that form, you have a lot of freedom. And so I know that's a little bit of a paradox, but that's how it works. Yes, it's like these are the parameters we want to work with, but within that you can find all sorts of different colors and different notes to play. And again, that's the joy of it.
Absolutely, and I think that was a really great way you described it, like comparing it to Shakespeare. I think that was a great way that you brought Shakespeare into this conversation, because it really is that, exploring the character, and it's obviously really great that you brought up that they do try and, keep it close to the original where possible, but give you a sense of freedom with your own portrayal as well.
Yeah, well, I also understand the purists who want to just not have a dubbed version. That's fair enough. I get that, of course. But I got to say, it's also a pleasure to listen to the original and think, do we want to go in that direction, or how do we want to play this? So a lot of work does go into this. People who are doing this work take it very seriously. Because we know we have an incredible fan base. People really love this. So you want to do justice to that while you're doing it. And again, it's been a joy to do that. It's been fun to, the community of voice actors out there and directors is wonderful. So there's that family that I'm now a part of, which, people that I love dearly that I've met over the years doing this. And often we don't see each other. Sometimes, believe it or not, for years on end, because we're not in the booth at the same time. And yet we're hearing each other all the time. And then, of course, communicating through media. But, often we won't see each other face to face because of the nature of the business. But it is fun. It's good to be part of that family, kind of a circus in a way.
Yeah, not a lot of people really think about it in terms of the fans, but you're absolutely right in that animes, they don't, in the voice recording, you don't really see a lot of the cast. Usually you're recording on your own and might not see any of the other cast members, and not including the crew, for a long time because you just record on your own. So I'm glad you brought that up as well.
Yeah, there were very few. There was, I think, we did that. There are a few Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle episodes where we'd have 5 of us in the booth, and it was a hoot and a half, because then you're just dealing with a person right next to you, and they did it just for that reason. I remember times we'd sit down and actually have a script read for it, like we would with a Broadway show. You sit down and have a meet and greet and do the initial read of the play. So we'd read the script, and then, we'd come back, and later on we'd go in the booth together. And, man, that was the best. That was some of the best experiences. Because then it's live. It's really happening.
Yeah, I imagine it's a lot easier to, respond to someone else, recording a line in the booth rather than just having to imagine how they deliver the line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different animal. It's fun. It really, then as actors, energetically, you just build off each other. That's what's really fun. The other way is a little bit more like CGI, because it's like if you're doing CGI, it's like, the guy's holding up the dragon head up there, so you got to talk to the dragon. So it's the same thing when you're listening to a person's voice. It's not impossible to do. It's a different type of thing you bring to it when you're doing that. And that, again, it's a different skill, craft that you bring to it. So they're different animals, but both a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And if you remember, I mean, this might be a tricky thing for you to remember, but if you can, what would you say were the biggest challenges you faced while working on Yu-Gi-Oh?
One of the, what I'm going to give you one is just for the fun one, actually, was because for the American dub, in the Japanese, I believe Odion died, but in the American one, they didn't want to have anyone die in the series, so I was brought back for months just to have a shot of me in the hospital bed, just raggedly breathing. Just so you know I was still alive. So that was fun, just to come in and do, yes, we just need a couple of breaths here, so you're still alive. So that was interesting.
That's hilarious. So you got paid just to breathe for a number of episodes.
Just to breathe. It's like, guys, and because, of course they'd be tagged onto other records we were doing. But it was like, guys, you could probably just reuse the same. It's like, no, we wanted to be a little different because the fans will be listening, which I also thought was great. They'll pick up if it's the same breathing as the last time. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, not gonna deny it. We fans are pretty crazy about it. We probably wouldn't notice
right.
if they just reused
God bless them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of crazy fan that, no matter what TV show I watch, if a shot gets reused, whether it's in the same episode or a later episode, I will notice and be like, oh, they reused a shot there.
Right. And I do that too. When you're in business, it's like continuity, and it's like, oh yeah, we saw that, about 20 seconds ago from the other angle, though. You had a 3-camera shoot on this, so yeah, I see. We're seeing that from over here now. Okay, got it.
Yeah, definitely. On top of voicing Odion in the original series, you also voiced him in a couple of the games, Capsule, Monster, Coliseum, and more recently, Duel Links. Now, I know Capsule, Monster, Coliseum actually came out around the time that the original series was airing anyway, so I'm going to focus this more on Duel Links, because that only came out last year, so it was 10 years since you had previously voiced Odion. Was it a challenge to get back into his character?
Oh yeah, it can be. You can be rusty. Some of them are still, pretty much all of them. Some are a little more present and more loud. Yes, we have lots of split personalities, so they'll come out sometime. But Odion, Yeah, it was like one of those, you're hearing that echo in the back of your head. It's like, yeah, kind of. And then you listen to them. That's what you do. You just, when you get in the booth, they'll just start playing you some of the old, it's like, oh, yeah, oh, right. And it all comes back to you. Oral, sound is one of the most powerful stimulants for memory. It's kind of, I think it's right behind smell as the most powerful. If you go to a place where you haven't been in years and you smell a particular, wood fire from that area. I remember that going back to northern Italy one time when I hadn't been there in decades. And suddenly, they burn, stuff in the fields, and just the smell of that took me back 20 years. But sound has that same kind of power. And so hearing it again, just bang, you pop right back into it. And then you hope the pipes can still make the same sounds. Because the instrument is 10 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love how you compared it to like smelling wood in Italy.
I told you, man, before we started, we'd be rambling all over the place.
Yeah, but I just love that. That's like one of the most random comparisons I've ever heard on the podcast from a guest, but also one of the best.
So far, Rory, so far. We're going to keep going, so who knows?
That's very true, but what a comment. That is crazy. So, of all of the characters you have portrayed in your career, which one has been your favorite and why?
Well, I can think of two that are almost like two sides of, it's like the yin yang. One would be Zodd. He was so much fun to do. Nosferatu Zodd was just a blast. There are others I loved doing because they were historical characters, like some of the animes, were cool. Nobunaga and folks like that. It's like, oh yes, that was an actual historical character. But the other one was Professor Pester, of all things, in Viva Piñata. And that was because it was basically, we were voicing it, and then they were animating it to our voices. And also, it was just for a lot of us, I got to see a lot of my friends on that one a little more, and we got to play. It was just absurd. It was kind of like the old Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny stuff, because it was a real little kid show, Viva Piñata, but it had some serious adult jokes in it, like Bugs Bunny used to do, and we loved it for that. I remember in one episode, Pester got captured by the piñatas, and they had it, and they were like, at one point, one of the piñatas puts the flashlight in his mouth and goes, "Time for the cavity search," and then ducks down out of frame. And I'm looking at this in the booth, are you kidding me? What the? And my next line, the next line from the piñatas goes, no cavities. And I go, I floss regularly. And it did end up being cut by the censors on that one. It's like, no, we're not going to let that one slide. But it was fun for that, for the adult humor.
Yeah, the good old censors.
Well, then you get the outtakes, And believe me, there are a lot of outtakes that are probably out there for this stuff. Because you get squirrely when you're in the booth for a couple hours. And so those sessions can get pretty wild.
Yeah, I imagine, but that is a really great bit of dialogue, cavities and the flossing.
I floss regularly.
That is really good. It's just a pity that was cut from the dub, but censorship happens.
Yeah, that particular cartoon was a hoot and a half. But in terms of, as you know, I often play like the bad guy. Destroy them now. I always loved that. I would say to folks, I think I did this on a lot of the villains that I play. You failed me for the last time. And they'll come back the next week and they've done it again. And I'm going, you failed me for that. It's like, I said that last week. Are there no consequences in this world? I should be destroying these people now. So, again, I'm rambling. Sorry.
No, it's completely fine. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's really hard to invest in a villain that, just keeps saying every week that they're, going to, you know, defeat you, and, after a while you just don't believe them anymore.
It's like, what the heck? Well, it's fun because you're playing that stock character. That's who this guy is, and he's the foil for the heroes. And of course his minions are going to be minioning. They're not going to necessarily be effective. So that's just a trope, which it's fun to play that out. But there is that, like, come on, man, let me just kill one of them, please.
Absolutely. Which would you say has been the most challenging role in your career so far, and why? And it doesn't have to be voiceover. I know you do theatre as well, so it could be a theatre role if you want.
Wow, that opens it up, my friend. That really opens it up a lot. I guess, since we're involving theater as well, one of the most challenging was doing a character called Lieutenant Jack Carson, was in a play called Black Horse. And it was about the Black Horse Regiment in Vietnam. And so the writer of it just was his story. And it was quite a journey he went on. And I worked with him in several variations of the show. He did different versions, like, for about 4 years running. And each time he rewrote it, a little more of the truth came out about what his experiences were there. And they were really dark. And this was his way of kind of healing, coming back and dealing with it. But he had been working, when he came back, he had been in a VA hospital because of the wounds he had. And Jack Carson was a former Marine helicopter pilot who had been wounded on his last mission and was now in a wheelchair, and ended up basically dying in the hospital. But that was quite a challenge. So doing the research, talking to a lot of Vietnam vets, what their experience were, because you want to do justice if you're playing a character like that. So I think that was probably the most challenging role that I played.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I really do like that when actors like yourself, take a role very seriously and do the research and talk to people to find out how you could best portray the character.
Well, again, that's, to me, anyway, that's the joy of the job. And also, well, I'm an Adlerian. I studied with Stella Adler, and she was big on, this is your responsibility. If you're going to be an actor, you take it seriously. You must do this. It's your job. If not, what the hell are you doing? So yes, it's about, her whole thing, it's about the truth. She said, people go to the theater, she said if people wanted to see reality, they'd ride the subway. They go to the theater to see the truth. And so to me, that's what it's about. It's getting to that universal essence and this experience. So, yeah. And not because you can certainly, we mentioned Shakespeare earlier. And my God, I love Shakespeare. Whoever they were, with all the theories that are out there about the writing, obviously universal. He's still, relevant 400 years after his death because of the way he deals with themes. So, yeah, a lot of those themes are present in Shakespeare, but this was based on an actual human being. And so to me, it's like, this is, somewhat biographical, and I want to do honor to this vet who basically gave his life for his country. So to me, yeah, there's a responsibility in that.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Outside of acting, you're also a fight choreographer. What was it about the craft that made you interested in becoming a fight choreographer?
Well, we've mentioned it already. It was Shakespeare. Basically went hand in hand. I believe it or not, I like to tell my students, 40 years and 150 pounds ago, I was a competitive fencer, which was true. I started fencing at Exeter. Then when I went to NYU, I wasn't on the fencing team, but I worked out with the fencing team just to keep my hand in. And then, as I said, I was working with one of my friends. We were doing Romeo and Juliet, and we were doing a scene from it, and he was playing Mercutio, and I was playing Tybalt. And he's like, well, you fence, you should choreograph the fights. And so we started doing it, and he forgot a move. I was lunging at him with a sword, and instead of retreating and parrying, he lunged at the same time. And the tip of my sword caught him right next to his eye and kind of pulled the skin away and came off. A quarter of an inch over, and that sword would have been right in his eyeball. And as it was, he had a tiny scratch on his occipital lobe. Wasn't even bleeding. But I freaked out, of course. And he was apologizing to me. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, no, that's it. We're cutting the move. He's like, oh, no, I can get it. I'm like, oh, no, I know you could get it. I'm just never doing it again. And that's when I realized there was a hell of a lot more to doing this than just knowing how to fence. But I went around the city, and I worked with anyone I could in the city who was doing it, just to see how what this was, because he is an entirely different animal. You do have to know how to actually fight in order to do it, how to sword fight in lots of different styles and unarmed fighting and all of that. But then it's a totally different animal to put it on stage, and then a totally different animal to put it on film or TV. That's a totally different thing too. But yeah, that's how I got into it, was as an actor, and then, let's check this out. And then as I started choreographing stuff, doing things, people would say, hey, would you do this for me? Because I'd be doing some stuff with them, and I'd say, we have to watch out for that. And they're like, what? Well, this moment right there, you see that blade goes, and I realized, you didn't see that. So I started realizing I was seeing things that other people didn't see. And then people started to ask me to do it and offer me money for it. And that's where it's like, cha-ching, I can make money doing this? Well, okay then.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But as well as those very interesting stories and like the horrifying thing about almost, getting someone in the eyeball, which I have to admit I had my hand over my mouth when you were telling me that story.
Oh my God. And again, if that had been a quarter of an inch over, that's a whole section of my life I wouldn't be doing anymore. I imagine I would never have picked up a sword after that, if that had happened. Absolutely. And it was kind of, you mentioned how do I get interested in acting and all this stuff. Well, I used to watch all the old pirate movies, and I'm not talking about Pirates of the Caribbean, but, going back to Captain Blood and the Seahawk and watching Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone sword fight. And I used to love that as a kid. I used to play that as a kid. And, never thought in a million years that I might be able to make a living doing it. And I've kind of made a living doing it. That's how it is in this business. You can kind of make a living doing it.
And my final question for you, David, do you have any upcoming acting roles or any other projects that you would like to talk about?
I have a few VO stuff that's coming up, but I don't know if I'm, that thing is like, can I talk about this? I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. Because sometimes you get, the sides and the scripts. It's like, yes, for your eyes only, all of that. So you want to be careful about that. But there are a few projects that are coming up that are kind of fun. And then I have a couple of shows that I'm doing right now in New York. One is the Government Inspector that's still running with Michael Urie. He used to be on Ugly Betty, and my God, that guy's brilliant. He's the modern Danny Kaye. He's just wonderful to watch. So if you're in New York, that's one I'd highly recommend. That's running through August 20th. And then a show at the Atlantic Theater, Simon Stevens show called Cross the Sea. And then another one that's going to be going on at the Signature Theater. In the Blood, that one's called. That one actually is In the Blood is about right. There's going to be a lot of blood in that one.
And I hope it doesn't come from accidentally almost poking someone in the eye. God, no.
Although I have had to do that. I've had I've had to, not just in King Lear, but I've had, I did the premiere of Sarah Kane's Blasted in New York. And yes, in that one, the guy pops the guy's eyeballs out and eats them on stage. So, yeah.
Not
an interesting career.
Yeah, very interesting, and definitely not a kids interview. Kids, beware of this podcast from now on.
Sorry. Well, it's Shakespearean, Rory. Come on.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting. And I'll be sure to keep an eye out for everything you've got coming up. And so that's all of my questions for you today, David. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the show today.
Oh, and you too, Rory. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks, brother.
You're very welcome, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, me too.
So I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks again for joining us today, and take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Time to wrap up today's show. Make sure to check out our podcast links, check out our website, website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/egp, check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast, check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast, check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp, check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official everythinggeekpodcast, check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/everythinggeekpodcast, email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com, check out our companion podcast Everything Geek Comiccast, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekcomiccast. Make sure to check out the host's YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Septus Destroyers. Check out David Brimmer's full list of credits on IMDb, www.imdb.com/name/nm0600421, and check out channel 1138 where we broadcast live from, www.channel1138.com. Geekset, everyone.
Yeah, I actually started acting locally in my town in Connecticut, doing community theater. I did a ton of musicals from age 8 to about 13. And I was also really active in my dance studio.
And when I got the job, I didn't know I was going to be doing it for like 10 hours a week for 2 years. So what's funny to me about that is, you're sitting